One of the challenges when talking about history in the church is that people mistake history and tradition. So, tradition, an example is that the wise men there are three of them, and they've got the names of Balthazar. And I can't remember the other ones. But there's absolutely nothing historically to say that the wise men were even three, that they were only men, and that they had names. And that's tradition added later. Another tradition is that in the Roman Colosseum, there were underground places where Christians were held hostage and fed to the lions, and that great swaths of Christian believers were killed in the first centuries. History shows that's not the case. That was never how the Colosseum was used. There was hardly any martyrdom. In fact, most Christians worked inside the Roman government and Roman society. They were not a persecuted group of people. Another tradition is that the church was responsible for a lot of the killing of women during the burning times, and that they were responsible for large swaths of women being murdered by calling them witches. The truth was that the church worked against it. There was only an outbreak in Germany, an outbreak in England, and the church spent a lot of time trying to explain to people how this was not the way it was supposed to go. In fact, there's a monument in Trier, Germany, I believe, to the priest who was very active in getting the witch hunts to stop in that area of Germany. So, when we're approaching Christian history, a lot of the reasons why people are angry at Christianity is based on tradition. It's not based on our actual history. Our history is a whole lot more complex. Um, we are not a perfect people, no one is. But we have a lot of really great things in our history that we can point to. Yeah, the Crusades weren't great, but if you look at foot binding in China, the Christians were largely responsible for ending that practice. Christians are very active today in ending female genital mutilation. There's other things throughout history. Yeah, Christians were responsible for the slavery, but they were also responsible for ending slavery. As I said, not perfect, but if we parse through enough of the history and we identify what is tradition and what is history, we can be a little more comforted by the fact that historically we have done a lot of things right. The reason tradition takes over is because history of the Bible is not really taught well. And there was a couple of times through history itself, namely the Enlightenment and, believe it or not, the Victorian era, where a lot of people made decisions and told stories that had absolutely no factual basis. And those stories kept getting passed on and passed on. And if you've ever played the game of telephone, stories get changed. But if you've got two or three people telling you the same thing, even though they're all coming from the same sources, you'll think if it's three people, they must know what they're talking about. So these stories have been passed down, sometimes by the church itself, and we need to clean that up. So part of what I'm doing in these mini videos is trying to address the difference between tradition and history, and really underscore history and what was going on. Tradition also says there were no women as priests in the early church. Historically, that's not true.